It's 8:01 Calgary time, I believe 3:01 p.m. In England. So over to you to kick things off.
There you go. Yes, indeed, it is 3:01 here. As Craig said, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us. If it is your first time here, that Q&A is essential. I'm actually working off one screen today, so I'll be compact, but Craig has a few in front of him, and you can also make your questions anonymous if you need to or want to in that Q&A. As is the beginning of our Fridays, this is what I think SAPE might look like. I have no idea. We've only been gone 10 days, but you never know what the weather will do in that time. So SAIT and its main campus, as well as Craig and myself, most of the time, are based in Calgary, which is situated on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot and the people of Treaty 7, which includes the Siksika, the Pokane, the Kaurna, the Tsuut'ina, and the Iyahi Nakoda of Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Goodstoney. The Blackfoot tribes call the area Nokintis, which means the meeting of two rivers, the Bow River and the Elbow River. Obviously, we call it Calgary today. And it's also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta. Thanks, Craig.
Perfect. Thank you, Jenny. And before we get going, folks, I'm going to throw one more link into the chat. You'll see a few there. The very last one I put in there is a link to a Mentimeter poll. And we're looking for your input. So today is episode 95. Who knew 2.5, 3 years ago, Jenny, when we started these conversations that we would get to an episode 95, but we are on our way to 100 in the new year, and we'd like your input. These conversations. We've played around with this format a little bit as we progress through the last 3 years, and we keep coming back to the most meaningful and the most fun for us is basing the conversations off the questions that you bring and the conversation you bring to the chat. That link to the Menti meter poll is your opportunity to give us your feedback on what topics you would like to hear from us in the new year. And so please do take the time as we go through, copy that link, do it later. I think it is going to continue to be open through the weekend. And then as Jenny works through her jet lag next week, she'll start deciphering what we might want to take on in the new year.
Yeah,
Um,
and it literally takes 90 seconds. I did it earlier this afternoon just to check it was open. So it's a quick one.
Perfect. Yeah, great 90 seconds, and would certainly we welcome your feedback as always. Speaking of feedback, sometimes it's not welcome.
Hmm.
Sometimes it results in a little bit of disagreement, perhaps dissent, conflict, even. There you go, Jenny. Trying to
This
figure out
one.
how we were going to segue into today.
Really good.
Yeah, conflict and dissent probably, unfortunately, can come up around the American Thanksgiving dinner table or the upcoming Christmas season dinner table. But let's talk about conflict and dissent at work. We're not going to solve Uncle Ed's problems during this conversation, but Jenny, this is one of those topics that we often get a lot of questions about, right? I think conflict, a lot of folks just don't like dealing with it. A lot of folks like to avoid it, etc.
Mhm.
You're
Yes.
you're you're 7 hours in the future. Please let us know how we're going to handle conflict.
Friday's a good day. But you're so right. It's something that we get asked about a lot. It's something that people think about a lot, but it's something that we actually still really struggle to work with, to deal with. And I think part of the problem is that word conflict. The minute that we say conflict, you can feel a reaction of some kind in most people. And we get involved in it at home as well. So it's always a different game when it's with people that you're emotionally closer to. And it doesn't necessarily makes it any easier at work, but I think we've got the wrong framing on it. So conflict is actually a leadership asset. And to be challenged, in fact, in most cases, might even be a compliment because if I am willing to challenge you, it means that we have the relationship and the psychological safety to be able to do that. So if my disagreement, my dissent is healthy, that means I'm engaged. That means I'm thinking, I care enough, and it means we've got psychological safety there. So it's actually a good thing. So it's not that we want to sort of get rid of conflict. What we want to do is make it productive and make it useful. Because when it's useful, then we're going to have conversations that matter rather than just this surface harmony that's actually quite ineffective and is going to do nothing for performance as well.
Surface harmony. Sounds
I
like
just
a
made that up. How's
yeah,
that?
that's good. I was going to say it sounds like a potential title for a Beach Boys album, but um, no. So I think one of the things that I was going to raise as a question right off the bat is this concept of conflict as being a bad thing. Clearly, you've
Mhm.
already leaned into the fact that conflict in this context isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think where where things can sometimes struggle or fall apart is where folks see any sort of conflict or any sort of disagreement as being a bad thing. Um, and so, this surface harmony, fake um, faux harmony inside of a team, like where's where's the challenge there? Why just can't we all get along, right?
Because we're
My tongue is firmly planted in my cheek, Jenny.
because we're human and because our egos play a part in that doesn't feel good. If especially if we're not engaging in a healthy manner, especially if it's not normalized. And we rarely stop to think about the other side, like the consequences of not. And so, if we just did a poll, right, for people listening, how many difficult conversations have you simply avoided recently? But you know that they
Mhm.
matter. And for whatever reason, today's not a good day, or I don't want to get in their way, or that's too much pressure, whatever that might be. We avoid difficult conversations. We stay silent and we watch as we stay silent how trust might get eroded or how it costs more time or costs more money. And then how many times this week perhaps has everybody thought of something really important but not said it? And if you took all of those answers on one team, I just imagine the collective intelligence that would be lost by all that silence, by all that not speaking up. And so we don't often think about that silent piece. We take silence often when people don't speak up, they don't challenge us as, oh, okay, everything's good. If I hear nothing, everything's good. And we're not asking the questions, what am I missing? Who sees this differently than me? And so the conflict piece, we're not in good practice for it. And you can measure somebody's preference towards conflict. I actually don't like conflict at all. I'm really choosy as to where I'll engage. A lot of people will run rather than have the difficult conversation and then add the whole people pleasing into the mix. And it's like feedback. We're just not in good practice of it. Nothing is normalized to make it work for us. And so then we get those individual reactions, and then it gets difficult. And so people will shut down or they'll get ignited. And then we've got an emotional escalation, and we're into the how do we regulate that conversation?
Okay, there's a ton in there to
Oh, yes,
unpack.
sorry.
No, that's good. That was, as usual, a very comprehensive answer, and that's okay. My questions have sometimes been known to run on, Jenny, so that's all good. Um, you said something there, healthy manner and normalized, and I'm not
Mm,
sure what order we want to tackle this in. So, healthy manner and normalized stood out to me. All sorts of reasons we avoid conflict. There might be something in there as well. There's been comments and questions related to, uh, focusing on facts versus emotion.
yeah,
Emotion is what makes us all messy, right?
yeah.
You said something there about, if you hear nothing, everything's great. Um, as a leader, I get scared when I talk to my team and I hear nothing. That for me is always a red flag that
Mhm.
something has missed the mark. But maybe let's start with this. How do you approach conflict in a healthy manner? And how do you normalize having healthy conflict?
Yeah, um I think that it's been said in the chat as well. Like the first thing is often, especially at work, we're talking about a task, not the person. And so it makes me laugh. People want to say, well, don't take this personally. And they're looking right at you. Well, of course, that's personal. So, what we want to do is take it professionally, not personally. And if you do take it personally, excellent, because that means you care. So,
Mm.
but how can you shift that to a professional piece? This is the task. This is not you. And that ties into that second part too, though. How do we handle that? Because if somebody comes with the, well, I think your idea is a bad idea, that's personal. I think this idea has this use and we can build this. So there's kind of that, I'm hearing you, I hear your idea, and here's what I think too. Whereas very often we lead with that you and we point the finger and we say, well, this will never work, or that's an idea, but this won't work. And we start going down that spiral. And when we feel parented or challenged or attacked, we will react very differently than when we feel like we're in an adult to adult conversation where we're heard and valued.
Mm.
And when we talk about all companies want innovation, collaboration, creativity, and every idea is an idea. And you never know what gem will come from an idea. But when we're under pressure, this is the other part too, and often why it starts, we're under pressure, we're tired. This time of year, people are potentially emotionally struggling as well. Like Christmas or holiday season isn't fabulous for everybody. And so that increases that ignite piece. So we actually have to think about how we're going to engage in that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of engaging in this conversation, there's a few questions now I want to get to. They've started to roll in very quickly. The issue I struggle with is not necessarily the conflict, but managing the emotions related to the conflict.
Mhm.
How do you manage your own emotions during a conflict conversation and the emotions of the person you're having conflict with?
So that's a massive question. It's an excellent question. It was a massive question. The answer is way more than one of my verbal pukes on a Friday morning. But in short, I really like what Jefferson Fisher said. So when you get intense, when your emotions go up, you escalate, your sympathetic system escalates, like you basically elevate it. And so what we want to do is calm that down. And so one of the things that you can do is literally make your first word your breath, or make your breath your first word, whichever way around you prefer to say it. And by doing that, you just drop it just slightly. And when you really hit that emotional intensity, it's amygdala hijack. We call it flipping your lid when we're describing it in a classroom, because your amygdala, which is this bit, literally overtakes the system. Your cortex, your sensible brain, isn't engaged. So when somebody says to you in an argument, I didn't mean to say that, they probably didn't mean to say it. The part of the brain that says, if you say this, Jenny, that relationship between you and Craig is going to be demolished, that part of the brain is not engaged. But by making your breath your first word, you let that cortex catch up again. And now I'm still frustrated, I'm still angry, I'm still whatever, but I know that a response is better than a reaction. And it might simply sound like this. It might be as simple as, Craig, I am struggling to respond in the way I want to. I'd like to talk about this later. Right? But whatever we can do just to drop it. When it's somebody else, we want to remember that people want to be seen, heard, and valued basically every moment. And so what we tend to do is we're like, oh, don't be angry or calm down a little bit. But what they need is, oh, this seems like it really matters to you, right? Can you tell me something about that? And just opening that door for the conversation with them. So the tagline we would use is acknowledge, ask a question. And just by talking about it, they'll start to come down. You don't have to agree. You don't actually have to
Mm.
engage. Just acknowledge, ask a question.
Yeah. Yeah. We all know telling somebody to calm down in the middle of an argument can work so well.
Yeah, it's not going to work very well.
No, no, but I think to your point, when we often come back to this. I can't think of a session where you haven't talked about the fact that people want to be seen, heard, and valued,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And when that conflict arises, to your point, it is almost always related to somebody being passionate about a stance or about something. I think we know where it really starts to become a challenge, and where it's that when you're that individual, you're perhaps too tied to your idea or your
Yeah.
perspective versus what it is you're trying to solve as a team or as a group, right?
Yes. Yes. And so, the quick one to that is outcome over ego.
Mm,
And so it's hard though, because when it is yours, like maybe it's your idea or maybe it's your um you kind of it's you people feel threatened by identity, by belonging. And so if somebody's coming up with something that's better, sometimes that threat makes us want to hold on a little bit more. And so how can we align in the right direction to where we're going? So a leader can really help there in terms of what is the decision that we're trying to make, or what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and helping people to move towards that, keeping us on track with the conversation so that it can stay task orientated as opposed to getting people orientated. Because the more we escalate, the more likely we are to move into a people mode as well.
yeah. A follow-up question on the first word being your breath and the risk that you run of it being interpreted as a sigh.
Yes. So you have to practice it first. So if you just leave here today and you end up in a full-on like I don't know, vibrant conversation, and you're like, yes. Okay, so but if you practice it, you can actually make that breath really silent. And the funny thing is, on a psychology basis, if you ask me a question and I answer with a breath first and then my answer, you actually think I'm listening to you and thinking about your question. And so it serves in two purposes. It doesn't often get misunderstood. The only thing to be careful of is that if you are super escalated, sometimes finding your breath is really hard, or sometimes even controlling your breath is really hard. Like people say, take a deep breath. Actually, just make sure you are breathing first and then find your breath. But that's a very emotional conversation. Okay, most times we're around a table or on a screen, just take that breath and you can keep it quite quiet in there. And to the comment just in the chat there, it's a pause. That's really what you're giving yourself, is that chance to be able to respond.
Yeah. And it's funny because I wonder when um, it feels like we've moved on as society or people that as soon as you stop talking, I have to start,
Yes.
right? When did that happen as opposed to your point, stopping, thinking, collecting your thoughts? It's
Mhm.
okay to write something down if you want to really remember. Like, when did we have to respond instantly?
And that's a
You
good
know?
piece too, because we've talked about silence. That kind of silence, you ask a question when we're all there and it's silent, but silent for a bit, that may be us engaging to think about, how we really want to respond. Possibly a very healthy thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, a few more questions here. I have somebody on my team who often disagrees with me, but instead of coming to speak to me, they go around and speak to everyone else on the team about why I am wrong. I'm having challenges dealing with this as I feel like it undermines my credibility. I want folks to feel good to disagree with me, but openly.
A lot can be to do with like how's the stage being set? And so, a little reflection for all leaders is, am I inviting the challenge or am I shutting down the challenge? And often we don't know we're shutting down the challenge. Like a
Mm,
classic might be, we hear this all the time, can we take this offline? Which says to everybody else around the table, public disagreement or public dissent isn't a good thing to do. Now, sometimes when it's off subject, absolutely take it offline.
yeah,
But if it's right on subject, maybe it's better to have that conversation in the room and model how this can go. And in that model, that productive response is say thank you. because their perspective will always be different than yours. And potentially there's a courage in disagreeing with you, especially if you're the leader or the hippo in the room. And so that thank you for that says to everybody else, oh, actually, okay, this is all right. I'm not going to get my head bitten off. I'm not going to get shut down in front of people, shamed, judged, whatever it might be. This is how we do it. And so questions like, what are we missing here? Does anybody see this differently than I do?
Mm.
Somebody brings something up and, can you tell me more about that? Or I say this all the time, can you double click on that for me? And, if there's more to give, they'll give it. And if there isn't, then they may just be popping that in there. So I would look at how you're setting up the stage and how that conversation is moving. When it's happening outside the room, that is kind of a set the stage piece. So generally debate happens in the room, alignment happens outside of the room. And alignment isn't necessarily an emotional thing. That is an action. We're moving in this direction. So
Hmm.
setting up the room for debate or healthy conversation or active dissent, whatever we want to call it, is a key part of collaboration. But when we leave moving forwards in the same direction. And then you have to hold people accountable if that's happening.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go with that is just on this question. Would you ever, if you're this individual, just go take that person aside and talk to them one on one, especially if you know this is going on where they're going around,
Yeah.
creating alignment around you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the calling in is healthy as long as you're
Yeah.
not working off gossip.
Yeah. Yeah. So you touched on two things, I think maybe for folks who haven't been here before that we want to just define a little bit. Hippo,
Okay. You give me both or just one? The hippo
just go for
is
one. Yeah.
okay, highest individually paid person's opinion. So if you're the hippo in the room, usually the leader or highest leader, highest ranked leader in the room, and the minute that you speak or make a decision, people will start to come with you, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Perfect. And then the second, calling in versus calling out.
Yes, so this is important in this conversation too. So what we want to do, we used to call people out, but very often what that looks like was blame, or we'd shame them, or we'd judge them. None of those are good for culture, let alone psychological safety, relationships, etc. So every now and then there is a reason to call somebody out. Absolutely. Um, it's rare though, very rare. Most times we want to call somebody in. Calling in is a one-on-one conversation as close to the time that it's happened as possible. So that does mean sometimes as a leader, you might have to say, okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break, call it a cell phone break or an email break or a bio break, whatever it needs to be, and you might catch that person straight away. We have to remember that most of the time they're not aware of their impact on other people. So the call in is it's actually an act of kindness. I'm not sure if you're aware of, and then open the conversation from there.
Perfect. Okay, a couple more questions, a lot more questions to get through. These two are somewhat tied together. So, hoping for some discussion on how to lead a team that perceives any type of problem solving conversation as conflict. So, problem solving as conflict. And then wondering if you can provide some strategies we can use to productively respond to conflict and turn around a difference of opinion into new ways of thinking or potentially innovation.
So I think most of the time where we could help ourselves is how we set the stage. And by set the stage, I mean as a leader and as a team. This isn't all the leader's job, but actually have the conversation about the value of different perspectives or the value of different ways that we see something. So, it is, that's the word I want. It's invaluable. That's right. I think that's the wrong word. But it's not helpful. There we go. Let's just go easy. It's not helpful if everybody smiles and nods and says yes, right? Because we haven't had a good conversation about it. So, maybe the questions lean into what is something that you disagree with that we're not talking about, or what's the real issue that's happening that we haven't named? Those are quite sort of safe questions in terms of you need psychological safety to have them. What you could even do as a leader is ask for one dissenting viewpoint, like put an empty chair at your table and say, what would the empty chair say if they disagreed with it? Now, that doesn't have to be a person. It can be, well, that empty chair, if that was so and so, they might disagree with this, or they may not like this part. So you're basically just teaching them to see it differently. So that team that sees problem solving as a conflict, well, to start with, let's put different characters in there. So this is your stakeholder, this is your client, this is the team that we affect with it. How would they respond in here? And just get them used to speaking up differently to it. The key in all of it is your productive response and holding other people to productive responses. So productive responses happen in your body language and they happen verbally. So rolling your eyes is not a productive response. Sighing is not a productive response. But asking good questions, being curious, actually meaning it when you say, whoa, that is a different perspective. Thanks for
Mhm.
sharing that. I had no idea. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with it or go with it, but you are recognizing that the value of how they spoke up.
Yeah. I have a feeling that there's going to be people leaving this conversation thinking about how they are breathing in the next conversation that they have.
Friday practice.
Never before will so many people have just been consciously thinking of their first breath. Um, a couple questions, Ty. You said something earlier about parenting or
Mm,
within this, and so a couple questions I think that are somewhat tied together. Um, when you said feeling parented, I could relate to that. How do you deal with people in the workplace who treat you like their children? I think that's a common occurrence. And so this is very similar. How should I respond to a manager that is two levels above me, but frequently speaks as if we are in a parent-child relationship, which immediately makes me feel defensive? How do you avoid shutting down?
yeah. Um, it's difficult because the minute that we feel in that position, we become more emotionally engaged. So the first, what we're talking about here is boundaries, right? And it may be that you have to own whatever it is that they come to talk about. Like I can see the need for this conversation. And my request is that we have this conversation as two adults. At the moment, I feel like a child at school again. You may be able to have a conversation as clear as that. The clarity is essential. It may be, when I hear repeat the statement, there'll be a statement in there that makes you feel like a child. That is that part. When I hear whatever that statement is, I feel like I'm at school again. I'm wondering if we can talk about how we approach these conversations. It's It is a difficult one to deal with, and it's one that we want to catch in the moment. But the one thing I will say is what happened before then to cause that conversation. So look this way first. And that doesn't mean that you behave like a child or something, but is there a pattern as to when they arrive in that parent mode? And then to leaders on the call or even colleague to colleague, when are the times where you show up with that little background voice of, I'll show them who's boss, or I've got to set this straight, or, you're kind of dismissing the person and their work. Remember that, we're all adults when we go to work. So we've been to school, we've been parented, we're an adult with a skill set that has chosen to work for your company. And most people now, when they're choosing to work for a company, that's a lot of hours and a lot of work to get into that company. So we can handle these conversations differently.
Yeah, no, that's good. Um, I struggle with shutting down. I struggle with shutting down in conflict situations. I find it difficult to gather my thoughts in that moment. Is there any advice you have for managing this?
So regulation is going to be really, really important. And so often when we feel like it's both actually, when we feel like we're escalating and when we feel like we're shutting down, there's an emotion attached to that. So the first work is, what is that emotion and what purpose is it serving you? Now, chances are, I mean, that you've written the question in our Q&A, thank you, because at least, I don't know, 100 and whatever other people are thinking it, um, of the hundreds. Um, that emotion is causing a body language and a mindset. Are they helping you? Chances are not for you to have written that question. So, what is the emotion that you'd like to be in? Right. So, let's say it's frustration, and your frustration is a tension, and your body language is here. But actually, the one that would serve you better is, let's say, curiosity, close to an emotion. Right? The body language for curiosity is not this. The body language for curiosity is this. The mindset for frustration is, this has got to be done quicker, and I want this to be over. Right? Fast forward, we're speaking too fast, we're reacting. The mindset for curiosity is, what can I learn here? What am I missing?
Mm.
What else do I need to know? So it's a different container, your body, and it's a different mindset how you engage in it. And so if you, whether you're somebody who shuts down or shoots up, okay, what's the emotion that you're in and what would be more helpful? That's what we call emotional agility. And it's practice, 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 practice. But you got to catch yourself in the moment first and start to take note.
Yeah. And it is okay, I think, sometimes to, you mentioned it earlier, recognize those moments where you're going to have to return to the conversation, right? We
Oh,
often think, right,
yeah.
you don't have to solve it in the moment. Obviously, many of us would probably like to have it done and solved in the moment, but it's okay to pause and
Mhm.
say, listen, I need time to think on this, and can we talk about it later?
Yeah. And I think it's also okay. Like talk about emotional regulation like this should be easy. Right? It's not. You said it right off the outset today. We're humans and we're emotional, and this is messy. And so sometimes we get it wrong. And think of the value of that, especially as a leader, to come back and say, I didn't do so well on Wednesday. So first off, here's my apology. And
Mm,
secondly, here's what I'm going to do, or here's what I want to hear, or here's where we could have gone. And most people will value that vulnerability. It's data. It's
yeah,
helpful.
yeah, absolutely. It helps build that trust, right?
Yeah.
Um, which comes to a question here is how do you have those difficult conversations with a manager when trust has been broken?
Decide you're going to have the conversation to start with. Take the time to be clear on what the conversation is about. So what is it that broke the trust? Um, what is it that you're asking for? It's flying just on my tiny right-hand side of my screen here, but there's a lot of conversation in the chat about I statements instead of you. 100% agree. So if you lead with you do this and you do that, that person's going to, or your leader is going to feel parented in that situation. So come back to the I statements, right? What is it that you've noticed? There's a pattern. How do you feel, right? I am, one word is an emotion. And then what is it that you would like? What is it that you want? What's your request? And that's usually a question. And that's the beauty of a conversation because at the moment of the question, I give the control of the conversation over to you. So now my job is to listen as opposed to keep talking.
You've raised some zookeeper conversations here, Jenny. And
Oh,
how do you handle a hippo that responds in a way that basically shuts down the conversation?
you know what, I think it's almost the same way depending on the relationship that you have with the leader. So I would look, I'm kind of a fan of patterns. Everybody has a bad day, and at the moment, we have a lot of people under a lot of stress. But if you've had two or three team meetings where the conversation has been shut down and you're the person that has that relationship with the leader, you're going to ask for some time, you're going to make the request, you're going to ask if you can offer some feedback and or feed forward if you like our terminology. And if they say no, then that's information for you. But if they say yes, then using your I statements, I've noticed, give it exactly. and I'm concerned. That even could be your emotion. And here's what I want to say. The other thing too to recognize is if this comes from nowhere, are they okay? Right?
Mm,
What's going on for them? Right? I've noticed that conversations are getting shut down really quickly. Is everything okay? Stop talking the minute you've asked that question, though.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny because we often come back to remembering that leaders are people too,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And the leader as being the infallible person is not really a productive construct, right?
no.
So again, the I questions has triggered a different question. In hospitality, the term "we" is often used. What are your thoughts on the constant "we" collective when approaching conflict?
I can say this because I'm sitting here in England at the Royal We. Um, so I when we work with people and we're trying to shift towards I statements and leaving you, the comfort zone is to go to we. So a leader turns up and they says, I think we need to, and you know that your team is just looking at you saying, it's not we, you have absolutely no intention of doing this, engaging in that. And so use we if you really mean we, like both of us. If you don't really mean we, then use I. And then somebody out there will be saying, yeah, but some people when they're really egotistical, it's I've done this and I do this and I do. That's a different emphasis on the I, right? When we're owning conversation, it is a simple here's what I see or what I know, here's how I feel, here's what I'm asking for, or need, or want, or will do.
Yeah, good. Um, I'm thinking of a scenario where employees are challenged by management. A lot of time, the challenges are well outside the proposed. Um, Other than saying we will get back to you, there are productive ways to respond to that. So you're getting challenged by management to probably try and take on things that are out of your control, perhaps not achievable.
I think I think to return, so I'm trying to put some words around this that it might be. If you're challenged on something that sounds unreasonable, out of scope, whatever those parts might be, is just to come back and it's almost like you reflect the question or reflect the challenge. So if you said, I don't know, the challenge was Jenny, we need this, this, and this by here, I would come back to you and say, so this, and this, and by this date. And I'm looking for your yes, because that is the point where I know that we've got misalignment. And so then I
Mm.
can talk about that's not exactly what I was expecting, or that is not what we spoke about previously. And remember, clarity is key. Often, if we're worried about the other person, how they react, we'll skirt around the outside of the conversation and we actually never get to the point. So if I've double checked it, so just to check this and this by this date, or this challenge to do with this topic, they don't align to me. Can you connect the dots for me? And we need to pause in there long enough for them to be able to do that for us, but then stick to the clarity of the conversation. We need clarity and we need honesty is the two important pieces in there. And
Yeah.
notice that was honesty, not brutal honesty. Sometimes those two get confused.
Are brutal honesty and radical candor the same thing? Sorry.
Yeah.
I think we got time for one last question here. Our team is working through some challenges where staff feel threatened, not physically or emotionally, but we all have our jobs, and some changes have made people to feel threatened in their roles. This is causing some conflict with a few individuals. Any tips on how to manage this type of conflict?
Um, when we feel threatened, we feel that everything is happening to us. And so we fall into threat and resistance, a little bit of victim, actually. And within victim, we even get our villains, the characters for everything. But the victim is everything happens to me, I have no control. The villain is I'll challenge everything for the sake of challenging everything, right? I'm just being devil's advocate because I can, or I'm just being honest when it hasn't been asked for and it's not helpful
Yeah.
within there. And
With all
so,
due respect.
yes, yes. So what we want to do is offer some kind of reframe where rather than life happening to us or the situation happening to us, how can this happen by us? Because the minute that we get to by us, we get much more into a trust situation, a curiosity piece, and more control in terms of what we can actually control rather than being constantly concerned about what's not in our control. So I think it's ways of thinking of how you can bring people back to that. Okay, how does this happen by us? A really good example is when everything is changing and people are tired of change, we focus on all the things out of our control that are changing and the fear and the uncertainty. We have no control of that. But actually, if we stop and look at everything that's the same, there's lots of things that are still the same. And these things are in our control and we can actually perform here, here, and here. That gives people the momentum back again rather than that constant downward spiral.
Yeah, that's good. One more?
Sure.
Okay. I'm just conscious of the time here and knowing that you got a few slides, but how do you approach an employee on the leadership team that constantly tries to find the negative or looks for a reason why a new initiative will fail and struggles to be open to new ideas?
I think that ties into what we were just talking about there as well, in that constantly on the negative, constantly finding what's wrong. It's it's a sort of constant state. And so how can you either work with it? So if they find the negative, can you offer them this second strategy? Say, can you offer them a yes and? So, yes, I
Mm.
hear you. And here's what I'm seeing that says that may not always be true. Or here's what I'm saying that says this is an opportunity that we could step into. And I hear the risk and I'll mitigate it this way. So that and actually lifts us into possibility. The alternative, of course, is but or that no, and then that downward spiral. Or we just stop talking because we're like, oh, here we go again, worst case everything.
Yeah.
And now we've offered nothing. Whereas a couple of and steps, we could have ignited that conversation and maybe helped them. The other thing too is understanding them and where they're coming from, which is relationship piece.
Yeah, I think the one thing that struck me in the question was the word tries to find the
Mm,
negative. And yeah, I think you know, yeah, the if you were in their shoes, you would probably be doing the same thing because everything that they are them, and that's what they do, right? And so how do you, to your point, how do you try to find the additive versus trying
yeah,
to lean into the corrective, if that makes any sense? So
it does. And sometimes that's just what we've been taught.
yeah,
So it maybe they're just we need to show them a different way.
yeah. Speaking of showing folks a different way, we need to show them the way to the end of the webinar, Jenny.
We
It's
will
been a
get
great
there.
conversation with some fantastic questions, folks. Um, and as always,
There we go.
there we
Okay.
go.
So, as we always promise, it is our promise to you, one big idea, two applied strategies, and today, actually, three questions. It's a Christmas gift, Craig. The big idea for today is what if challenge is actually a leader's greatest compliment? If you remember that somebody challenging you on your team, they're complimenting you, they say, they're telling you our relationship is strong enough that I am okay to challenge the status quo. That's you as the leader. So embrace it as a challenge. Don't forget the productive response to thank them for doing it. You role model the way forward, which is only going to be healthy for you as well. So we offer two strategies. There's actually three on this page. But if you're looking for people to dissent your job, if you like, as a leader, but also as a team, like engage in this. set the stage for everybody to be successful. The more we set ourselves up for this success, the better that this will run. So if you need to name the tension, we talked about this earlier, focus on the problem, not the person. As a leader, call people back to this. You get what you tolerate, or the other version of that is you permit what you permit, you promote. And so if you let people get personal with it, parental with it, that's not healthy. That's not going to be a great conversation. And this last one I'm a big fan of too. We're very quick to interpret everything. Those who lean into using the word should, they should do this. It should be done this way. That's an interpretation. What if we observe it? Right? I notice that there's an excitement around this conversation. I notice that as a team, we're very stuck on this process or whatever the part may be. Make an observation and then take the conversation from there. So, three different ways that you can help set the stage for success. And then we just talked about this actually, it was great timing. Can you build that yes and mentality? Now, when you build a yes and mentality, your job is to make everybody look brilliant. So when we talk and when other people offer perspective, that yes and says, yes, I hear you, and I can add this, or and I think it's useful because of that really builds the culture where we're prepared to throw unbaked ideas, just seeds into the mix that we can really get to those marvelous moments of innovation, creation, collaboration as well. And sometimes we actually have to help and teach the people around us to be able to do that. And for those of you just joining us, you don't actually understand how rare this is, but there are only three questions actually only three question marks too, Craig, on the screen there. Usually I am a believer in way more than three, but I am on holiday this week. So here are your three questions that you can noodle on, think about, take to your team, use them, lean in, and just really get comfortable with good organic honesty and having the conversation. Okay, there you go. All yours, Craig.
Excellent. Thank you, Jenny, and thank you all for joining us. We will be back 2 weeks from today, one last time before Christmas break. And perhaps then we'll get to talk about Christmas markets, Jenny. We didn't get there today.
I haven't been to one yet, so
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Good. I look forward to the updates. But no, enjoy the rest of your holiday and safe travels home. As always, I appreciate you and what you bring to these conversations. And folks, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Take care.
Have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you, Craig.
You bet.